Hey guys, welcome back. And if you're new here, my name is Vic, a senior from Yale University who makes videos on how to live more intentionally, take care of ourselves, and just stay grounded in our very stressful world. About 2 weeks ago, I made a video called How I Learned to Love Being on My Own. And in that video, I shared a little bit around my fears and why I thought I felt this discomfort around being by myself. And after that video, a lot of you suggested that I make a video about practical tips on how to get to that space. So that's exactly what this video is going to be about. Count the number of times I said video already in this video. Anyway, I hope this will be helpful for you, especially since a lot of us are still in quarantine. There's a lot to get into, so let's get to it. And as usual, timestamps are in the description if you need them. The first and most crucial thing to understand is less of a practical tip and more of a mindset shift, which is there's a big difference between being alone and being lonely. I know this is a pretty fundamental and basic understanding, but I still think a lot of us subconsciously try to surround ourselves with other people because we think that will help us chase away the feelings of loneliness. But as I mentioned in the previous video, we've all experienced being surrounded by other people and yet still feeling isolated and not really understood. So we need to understand, even though it's true that the opposite of loneliness is connection, that connection might not necessarily be connection to other people. It could be connection to yourself, connection to nature or your environment, or simply connection to the present moment. So moving on to some actual practical tips. The first thing that I would actually suggest for you to do is to write a want-to-do list and do it on your own. Most of us have things that we would like to do, but never actually end up doing them. Whether it's trying a new recipe or going to a pottery class or just going into that new cafe that you always see on the way back home but for some reason never go into. So I encourage you to sit down and write a list of all of these things and really customize it to you. If you like reading books, write a list of books that you want to get into. If you really like cooking or want to get more into it, bookmark a bunch of recipes that you would like to try. And if you just moved into a new area or moved to college, write down a list of experiences that you want to have or places that you want to visit. I would also encourage you to write down things that you wouldn't normally do because a lot of the times we don't know that we would like something until we've actually tried it. After you have your list, the next step is for you to do it on your own. This is important for several reasons. First of all, it will help you get used to hanging out on your own and just learning how to truly enjoy experiences in your own company. Secondly, this will help us figure out our individual interests because usually what ends up happening when we hang out in groups is that we just end up doing whatever other people feel like doing. Finally, I love this tip because in general, it's just so fun to create memories doing new things. But when you do it alone, it comes with this extra sense of accomplishment. When I started to take myself out more on these little dates, I started to connect this feeling of excitement with the time that I was spending on my own. And this created a positive feedback loop in my brain. Instead of associating being alone with the feeling of being sad and lonely, I started to associate it with the high that came with discovery and trying new things. And what ended up happening for me is that I became more comfortable doing more challenging things over time, like going from sitting alone at a coffee shop to attending a play on my own to traveling solo. And if you stick to your list, I'm sure this is what will happen to you in time too. My next tip is for you to start journaling. And yes, I know there is a lot of hype around journaling these days, so you might be sick of hearing it, but hear me out. I think journaling can really help you if you're struggling to be alone for several reasons. First of all, journaling can give you some clarity over why you don't like being alone. In my previous video, I spoke a little bit about why I thought I felt uncomfortable being alone, but every single person is unique, and so you might have a different reason for feeling this way. Maybe one person wants to be surrounded by friends because it makes them feel appreciated, and another person has abandonment issues from childhood traumas. So that's why I think journaling is a great way to get into our own heads and understand the root of our fears. Secondly, journaling is a great way to practice stillness, which is being comfortable sitting in your own thoughts and just connecting to the present moment. And I know this sounds like it's coming out of some meditation mindfulness magazine, which first of all you should not be surprised by because that's totally something I would read. But also it is really important because, as I mentioned earlier, the opposite of loneliness is connection. And when you are able to connect to your present moment and to your thoughts in the now, then you are able to not feel lonely even if you're on your own. As you guys know, I like to always sprinkle a little bit of personal flair into my videos, and so to prove to you that I actually do these tips myself, I wanted to share with you a journal entry that I had written on the 5th of March. And I had completely forgotten I had written this, but I do want to share it with you because I think it really does highlight my point well. After Spanish class, I was walking up Mansfield Street, and for the first time in forever, I didn't listen to anything on my way up. No podcast, no music, nothing. I didn't have my earbuds in, but instead really soaked in my environment. The birds chirping, the squirrels rustling around in the dead leaves, the radio I could hear through the windows in a car left in ignition, brilliant colors of the painted cookie cutter houses, the beautiful purple blush of flowers freshly bloomed, and the glorious, glorious sun shining down upon it all. I was struck by the realization of just how much I fly through life on autopilot. Even when I try to be intentional and productive, which I hope I usually am, I am also guilty of filling my spare time with mindless YouTube watching or simply forgetting that there is so much around me to observe, soak in, and be grateful for. Gratitude is not the hardest thing for me to practice, as I've had a lot of practice with it, but I still think sometimes I nitpick on parts of my life that aren't perfect, instead of being content in the moment. Today's stroll up Mansfield reminded me how much happiness truly stems from within. I felt so light, so full of joy, just being able to feel the sun on my skin after a long cold winter. There's much to be treasured in this world. So I came across this entry the other day and I had completely forgotten I had written it, but when I was reading it, I actually remember how it felt to be so grateful and happy in that moment just to be alive. And I also felt proud of my past self to be able to do that, to be able to live in the present moment and connect so deeply with nature and just find joy in the little things. And I really do hope that through journaling, you can find moments of peace like that in your own life too. And even if journaling does not resonate with you, there are many other ways to practice stillness. It can be simply eating a meal or going for a walk without listening to anything, which I mentioned in my journal entry. It can be, if you do yoga, lying in Shavasana a little longer just to let your mind drift, to daydream. The point is just to let your mind wander. And every time I've done this, things have come up for me, either new creative ideas or emotions, either positive ones that I wrote about in my entry, but also often negative ones like shame over something that I did in my past, or worry and anxiety over my future. And this is a great segue into my next point, which is to learn how to reprogram your negative thoughts or your negative self-talk. Now, being alone in our thoughts isn't easy because we are all our own biggest critics. We tend to dwell on the things that we don't like about ourselves, what we could have said or could have done, or all the failures that we've gone through in the past. Our self-talk and the way we treat ourselves can get really negative if we're not careful, and this happens to all of us, even those of us who seem the most self-confident individuals. So if you really want to be happy on your own, you need to learn how to deal with and reprogram these negative thoughts when they come to you, because no one likes to hang out around people who bring them down, even if that person is yourself. So if you struggle with negative self-talk, I encourage you to start out by asking yourself, would I say this thing that I'm saying to myself to a friend? We tend to be better friends to complete strangers than to even ourselves. We're kinder, more compassionate, more patient. We highlight their strengths and accomplishments, and when they do encounter failure, we remind them that making mistakes are a part of life. We accept our friends for who they are, and that's something that we need to learn how to do to ourselves. Honestly, working through childhood traumas and a negative self-talk is a whole video or whole series of videos on its own. So I'll leave some resources in the description below if you feel like you need some inspiration to get started. Okay, so I still have about 3 points and I don't want this video to be too long, so I'm just gonna breeze through them. The next thing is to learn to respect and prioritize your own needs. Now, you can't enjoy being alone if you always feel guilty turning other people down to take care of yourself. So if someone invites you out to do something and you really don't feel like going, you don't have to say yes. You can just learn how to kindly decline invitations and perhaps reschedule for a different date if you would still like to go out with that person. If you go for an event and you don't like it, no one is forcing you to stay. You can go. Ultimately, it's learning what you need how to listen to yourself, and that it's okay to look after yourself. The next thing is something that I mentioned in the previous video, which is to take time off social media. And there's so many reasons for this, but I won't go too in-depth into it. Social media, if it's not used right, can give you a false sense of connection to other people through pictures on Instagram, for example, instead of that genuine face-to-face interaction that I think we all crave. It can end up making you feel pretty empty. So limiting social media use has really helped me. That can either be through turning off your notifications or completely deleting the app. I talk a little bit more about social media on my other videos, so check that out if you're interested. And finally, the last point is to remember that it takes time and it won't always be easy. Building a relationship with yourself is just like any other relationship. It takes time and effort. So you're going to feel lonely sometimes, but that's part of the process and it does get easier. The right people will come into your life when they are meant to. So the next best thing that you can do in the meantime is to just really work on yourself. If you watched till here, be sure to give this video a like if you enjoyed it, because it really does help me reach more people. If you're a regular viewer on my channel, I do have a question for you that I would love to get your feedback on. I did a poll recently on the community tab, my first poll actually, which is really exciting, asking you guys what kinds of content you would be interested in seeing from me in the future. Now, majority of you, or about 40-something%, said Yale-related videos, and I know a lot of my subscribers come from my Yale admissions videos, but I think the thing that concerns me about this poll is that I don't ever intend for my channel to be a fully college-based channel. As you can see, I produce a lot of self-care content, like how to live more mindfully and intentionally, and that's the kind of content that makes me excited. So that's why I'm feeling a little bit conflicted. I'm afraid that if I put up more Yale videos, then people will come to my channel because of my Yale-related content and then subscribe to me expecting to see more of that kind of content, but I can't promise that for the long term. I'm gonna put out videos that I enjoy making, even if it may not be popular. I definitely still do want to do some Yale-type content, for example, the mindsets that I think helped me get into Yale, or some of the things that I think people need to know before they apply or get into Yale. But that's never going to be the whole of my channel, because that's only one part of who I am. And I think that the message that I have to share is a lot bigger than just my experiences at Yale. So I don't know, I wanted to hear from you guys. I want to make sure that I'm giving you content that you want to see, but at the same time, I don't want it to conflict with what I personally want to create in my heart. Yeah, so I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. But anyway, next week I think I will do a video about what I wish more people knew about Yale before applying, and yeah, so stay tuned for that. And definitely please feel free to leave me more suggestions on what kinds of content you would like to see from me. Until then, I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you next week. Bye.